And our job, I think, in preparing for assessments is try to get passionate about that particular piece of work. And if you can get passionate about it, then you're going to do great. And I think that's the key.
Welcome to the Red Print, your wellness podcast. I'm Daanish.
And I'm Neil. And today we're going to be talking about how to keep calm during the assessment period. And we're going to be giving advice if you're the sort of person that might leave things to the last minute, or you find it difficult to get motivated and inspired.
As well as those of you who might count yourself as a perfectionist. And I'm sure you realised Rachel's not here with us. So you'll be with both of us, lovely human beings. We hope you enjoy this episode. And
remember, if you like the episode, if you learn something new, if you want to hear more, then make sure you hit the like button and afterwards hit that subscribe, and then you'll be hearing from us every time a new episode comes out. Why is it? Because it's a really common thing that I will have a conversation with students and they'll talk about the fact that, oh no, I've left it all to the last minute and now I've got loads of stuff that's all piled up. Why is it you think that it's common for people to leave things to the last minute? Because I hear lots of different kind of discussions, and I think about how I organize myself, and part of it is the kind of anxiety of the amount of work that you've got to do. Part of it, I don't think it's laziness. I don't think, well, maybe for some people, but I don't think that's a particularly common reason. There's also that idea of not being quite sure where to start. What is it the reason that you think?
as weird as it sounds, not taking accountability for it. I think for me this year, I'm taking ownership of the work I got to do. So through that, I'm just like, if I want to produce the best work I can, I need to start now. Whereas in my first year, I was like, it's fine. So I think being realistic with it, like some people even say they work better last minute, like under pressure, but come on, like everyone can work fine under pressure, but that's just you finally being hit with a realization of like, yeah, I kind of need to do it now. So I think it's a mix of not realizing what you have to do, not taking accountability for it, and kind of just being like, not sure what to do, not being clear on what to do, if any of that makes sense.
Of course. And I think that point about the being inspired is important, because that idea of working under pressure, and I hear lots of people talking about this. Yeah, like I'm going to leave it to the last minute because I always produce my best work the night before. Yeah. And as you say, like the elements of that will be true in that the pressure of it will make you think, it might make you be creative, but it's such a risky strategy. And I would say to students that just challenge yourself to say, this year I'm going to try something different. Okay, it may have worked out for you before, but it may have worked out leaving it to the last minute. And there's a bunch of people that will leave things to the last minute and they'll get really good marks. Fantastic. It is such a risk. And at university, I think it's any piece of assessment, there's too much riding on it, I think, to take that sort of a risk, rather than just thinking, okay, well, I'm going to produce my best work then. Well, what about if you do some of the pre-work in advance? So yeah, okay, you can leave some of the things to the last minute. You can leave that, the very final draft, if you want to leave that to the day before. But actually, you need to get all of your ducks in a row in advance of that. So there's lots of invisible work that can come along with preparing an assignment. And I think this talks to your point about not being clear on what you want to do, or what the assignment requires. And the invisible work is very, very necessary in terms of doing an assignment. And it's also really easy. That's the advantage, is that it's doing things like downloading every piece of information that you can about that piece of assessment and putting that all into a folder, reading it, going and highlighting the particularly important aspects. That's just invisible work. Downloading readings from the reading list. Again, nice invisible work that you can do in advance. You don't have to think conceptually about it. You can just do the technical jobs. And I think in doing that, that can free up some of that decision-making capacity that you would otherwise be spending the night before. And That means the night before, all of the detail gets lost, right? Because in the night before, you're just focused, the pressure is on to just write your work. Okay,
Yeah.
but the detail of really exploring certain aspects, really exploring this piece of literature, or really exploring the reading list, that detail becomes a little bit lost. So I think doing invisible work can be very helpful for creating an effective assignment.
Understanding what you're going to write about before you even write about it. Okay, so what I mean by it is exactly as you said, going through the reading list, going through the library, going through the journals, articles, lectures, so you get an idea of the structure of your work. So right now, that's the stage I'm at. So I'm looking at my assignments today onto, I suppose, Sunday, then I reward myself on Sunday, like a movie or something. And then, so anyway, back to the point. So going through the materials and understanding what I'm going to write about. So I have a clear structure, a clear, I suppose, assignment. I know exactly what I'm going to talk about paragraph by paragraph. So for me, that kind of frees up any thinking space. So let's say, for example, I want to write about culture in one paragraph. So I read up on the specific resources, like in your reading list. If you are doing business and management, there might be some parts on culture. So you read that and then you pick the important parts out. And then for me, I just put it on a Word document, get all the important parts out there. And then I kind of formulate my own argument through that. So by engaging with materials, as you said, in your bonus workshop, you actually become inspired to write a lot more, because you're not waiting around wondering what you're going to write about, talk about, because you're actively going into the research. You're actually understanding what you're writing about, typing about. So your assignment isn't just a bunch of waffle. Because I think rather than just describing it, you get a better understanding because you're taking the time to understand the information rather than last minute rushing. Yeah, it can be all right, but would you rather take the time, not be rushed? So when you come closer to your deadlines in January, you can take a step back, go through all the information, go through your final draft, and then be like, cool, I'm done. And then on to the next one, done. So I think it's all about, I suppose, as cliche as it sounds, taking time, not rushing it, and doing blocks at a time. So this week I'm going to do a structure. Next week I'm going to finalize, I suppose, this paragraph, want these many words. It's all about, I suppose, imposing upon yourself certain goals and sticking to those goals.
Yeah, and I think your point about inspiration is a really important one, because one of the reasons why we can not engage with something, and especially a piece of work that relies on, and like any assignment is, it relies on creativity and it relies on conceptual thinking. And oftentimes the thing that can make us stop doing that is thinking, oh, I'm not inspired enough yet to write this. Like I don't feel like I'm in the right headspace. I want to be really in the zone for this piece of work, and then I'm going to sit down, and you've got kind of this magical image in your head that you're going to sit down and you're just going to be typing away, and it's going to be gold and it's going to be perfect, and you're going to do it in a couple of hours, and you're going to have this piece, you're going to hand it in. And that situation just really is so rare when you just have 100%. That, that feeling of like a lightning bolt coming out of the sky, and it hits you and you're like, yes, this is what I want to do. That can happen. And I would say for me, of any of the projects that I do, for me, that maybe happens 2 or 3 times a year, that I actually feel so inspired that something comes out of the blue and gives me an idea of what to do. The other times, I have to just force myself to be inspired. I have to force myself, and I have to almost like kind of manipulate my brain to be inspired and to be motivated to do something. So one of the really interesting ones here is about a writer's block. So oftentimes we think we've got writer's block, and we think we've got that aspect. We've hit a wall, we can't go past it, and there's something almost physically that's stopping us from doing it.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, whenever I'm feeling that, I think, okay, there's nothing physically stopping me. mentally I am putting a barrier up here. So either I'm feeling anxious about this piece of work, or the other one is, if you want to force yourself to be inspired, then all you have to do is engage with some media around it. Now, media could be the basic one of go and download the lecture notes and listen to the lectures and see if you get inspired again. Okay, fine. We know about that. Other aspects could be go and watch a YouTube video about that particular topic, or go and listen to a podcast about that particular topic and go for a walk, or go and wherever you want to do. You don't have to just engage with the academic literature on it. You don't have to sit down and read a big long literature review to get inspired. But what you're having to do is just make your brain interested. And our job, I think, in preparing for assessments is try to get passionate about that particular piece of work. And if you can get passionate about it, then you're going to do great. And I think that's the key.
100%, because I think I relate to that 100%, because when I start reading about a topic, it doesn't have to be reading, okay? But when I'm reading about a topic, and then I'm like, oh, this is a little bit tedious, but you sit down and you're doing it. But then as you start that, I suppose, journal article, you're like, wait, this is actually really interesting. I'm enjoying this. And then you finish it and you're like, that wasn't even bad. Like, I enjoyed that. And then when you're writing about it, you're like, cool, because I'm enjoying it, you can write so much, I suppose, clearly. It's like, it's just like a waterfall, like flows like water. Like when you're enjoying it, it makes life a lot easier. However, what I was going to say is to do with that, like discipline, inspiration, motivation. You're not always going to be in the, I suppose, a feeling of saying, yes, I'm energized to do it. And I suppose that's with life. You have to kind of get through that mental block, because after, so let's say here's a block here. When you push past it, you understand that it wasn't even a big deal. It's just your, I suppose, your mind playing games on you, your mind wanting to be comfortable. So as you push it more and more, you realize how much more capable you are. And through that, you're like, okay, I could just do it. You don't even think about it. You're like, yeah, I can do it. Because you're pushing yourself. You're saying, okay, I need to do this. I'm doing it. And then you build yourself up step by step. And then let's say by January, you're in the zone. It doesn't matter what anyone else says, you're in the zone. So push past the block.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's it. It's finding what it is that interests you about these pieces of work. And if you can do that, and this comes up at graduation every time when I'm speaking to someone's parents about how they're getting on, and they'll say, oh, what was it that made them a particularly good student? And it's always, they were interested in the topic. And they found something interesting about the topic, and something about it that made them passionate. And that was their route in. And because of that, they were able to take that piece. And it wasn't just being done because it had to be fulfilled, but you could tell that they really love the piece. And that would be the challenge, I guess, for anyone. If you can be excited, about it. And I've had situations before where I've inherited a module, or maybe I'm giving a guest lecture on a topic that I don't really know anything about. I remember this happened one where I was doing a lecture on organizational context. This was a good few years ago. I remember picking up the lecture. I thought, God, this is really dull and really boring. And I was delaying, getting myself ready for it, and I was pushing it back. And then I thought, right, well, I am going to have to stand up in front of people for an hour to talk about this. And similarly with students writing an essay, I am going to have to write this essay. I can't just keep delaying it. So I thought, well, I'm going to just have to find something that I think is cool about this. And for me, in that situation, it was applying it to organizations that I knew or that I was interested in. So at that point, I was really interested in software companies and computer games companies who operated on these non-hierarchical principles. So I was like, okay, well, that's what the lecture is going to be about. And similarly, when people are writing essays, well, find the thing that relates to you and the thing that makes you excited about it, and bring it back to that. And if you can do that, that's the key. So we've thought about that idea of long-term focus. We've thought about the idea of finding your passion and finding your enjoyment. Would you have any other top tips for people for how to keep calm during the assessment period? And for some people that will be going through the assessment period right now, they may have an essay due tomorrow, next week, in the next 2 weeks, what would your advice to them be?
So you might have heard it 1,000 times, but I would say just get started. So if you're on campus, stay on campus, go to the library and start, because the longer you put it off for, if that makes sense, the longer you put it off for, I suppose the longer it's going to be put off. So just get started, then you'll realize how easy it is to do it. Because I think for me, what I struggled with was, I suppose, in general, procrastination. But then I realized I just got to start. You got to start somewhere. Like, you can either start now or prolong it even further. Just start now. Do what you can. It can be small. It can be massive. Just do something, and then it's a snowball effect. As you get involved in the topic, you become interested. You do more. You write more, and by the end of it, you've written a lot of words. So get started and stop thinking about it, worrying about it, because that's all internal. Just start it, and then you'll realize your worries aren't big. Like, they're small when you look at it. Just put yourself in a comfortable position just for a little bit, because you'll get used to it. And then through that, you'll realize how much, I suppose, you have within you, how much more you can do.
And I find a useful way of doing that, and I recommend that students do this, is that actually give yourself specific time in the week to focus on an assignment, because oftentimes, I think most of us found this last year, is that when you've got unlimited time and a project to complete, it can be really difficult to actually just find the time. And even if you had a full day, even within a full day, it can be really easy to procrastinate, to put it off. Do I want to start at 9 a.m.? Oh, I'm not really feeling it at 9. Okay, I'll do it at 12. Oh, no, I'm going to have lunch here. And then you push it back and back and back. So my recommendation to people is often as well, actually dedicate specific time. So you've got your timetable of what happens in the week, but figure out, okay, well, when is assignment writing time? And a timetable yourself in 1 hour a week for assignment preparation. And, preparation might include doing some readings and getting yourself organized, and then timetable yourself another hour in the week, and that can be actually for writing. And in that writing period, all you do is you put your headphones on, you put some white noise on, you focus, you keep yourself just purely on the task. You work for 20 minutes without distraction, you have 10 minutes off, and the amount that you can achieve in small bursts is huge, rather than just saying, right, I'm going to leave it to the end, or I'm going to leave it until a few days before, and then I'm just going to spend all day on it. You'd be way better spending bits of time, but really focused time, rather than trying to do it all in one go. For me, my productivity just drops massively after about an hour and a half is my max. So in any one day, if I had a full day to focus on a big project, I would probably get as much done in 2 hour-and-a-half chunks than I would maybe in 6 or 7 hours, because I just keep spreading it out into little bits and pieces, and it would be quite unsatisfying. So I think organizing your time into specific chunks and specific blocks can be really transformative, and can make the piece feel like it's not taking up your life as well, because it means you don't have to then work late into the evenings, or you don't have to work into your weekends. You can just say, no, I'm going to focus on it, but I'm going to focus on it now.
Yeah, I think what you said kind of made me think, when people are doing it last minute, let's think about how many hours you put in for last minute. Why don't you just start it now, do an hour, a couple hours every couple of days, every few days, and then by the end of the month, you would have done the same amount of work you would have done in that one day, just spread out. Like, it makes it, you just stop lying to yourself and do it, to be honest. Like, there's no point delaying something that's got to be done at the end of the day.
And as our final point then, when we're thinking about tips and tricks, what would your advice be for people who would consider themselves as perfectionists? So we've spoken about people who might leave their work until the last minute, and we've spoken to people who might find it difficult to organize their time in advance. What about for people who find themselves more, they start early, but they're always worried, and there's always something they could be improving, and they end up kind of getting caught in that loop? What would your advice be for those people?
To be honest, like, I understand what you mean by you think you want to think you've done enough, but you want to keep on doing better. Like you always think there's like a slightly higher chance you have of doing even better. So I'd say do what you can firstly, as obvious as it sounds, but then ask for help. So ask your teachers for help, ask your module leaders for help. And then if you really want, ask your friends to review it. So you get another perspective on it. Ask a family member to review it. So you get another perspective on it rather than thinking in your own head, what else can I do? Get another perspective on it and then realize that nothing can truly be perfect, but you can put as much energy as you can behind it and do the best you can. But don't be so fixated on it being perfect. Just do as much as you can, and that's it. Just focus on doing as much as you can, because then if you're truly, I suppose, focusing on that, it doesn't matter what the result is, because you're doing the best you can, and there's no way you can beat it. So be honest with yourself in terms of how much energy you're putting in and what result you want, and match those together.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And yeah, with students who are seeking perfectionism, you're absolutely right. And it's noticing when you start to get into that loop, because there's an ideal amount of stuff to do. You might draft something a couple of times. Fantastic. Like a good essay is always going to be a couple of drafts. It's going to be a first scrappy descriptive one, and then the second one you're going to try and perfect that little bit more. You might do a third draft where you're putting everything together, but actually when it starts going on and beyond that, it can become less and less useful to be hyper focused on particular areas. And you're absolutely right. And when you notice that you're starting to be triggered in that regard, you're triggered into this spiral, that is exactly the moment to reach out to tutors and to talk about those ideas and to talk about your concerns. Because with people that are worried about perfectionism, normally their worries would hang on one or two big questions. Oh, is this too focused on XYZ thing, or am I going into too much detail about this? Your concern will often be about one of a couple of things, and that is ideal content to talk to your tutor about, because what we love and what the best advice that we can always offer is to specific questions. And the things that I really like about students who have made that good start on something and they've made that effort in creating something, and now maybe they're a little bit concerned. What I love about that is that they have already done that initial work. They've come with specific questions. Is this area what I should be looking at? And that's when we can get into a really productive discussion. So if you can't speak to your tutor, then it's going back to, have they recorded a frequently asked questions lecture, or what does the material in the assignment brief say? Go back to them, because that will oftentimes stop you in that spiraling.
Yeah, 100%. Like, you have to, I suppose, be self-conscious of the fact that when you're doing your work, is this, I suppose, important? And then if you're unsure, ask. Because if you keep on going in that spiral, you'll stop focusing on the main priorities and then become sidetracked. And then you're going to lose so much more time focusing on that like tiny little bit, whereas you can put your energy somewhere else. So ask someone who has a clearer perspective on it rather than staying in that same loop. Because when that perspective shines, you'll be like, oh, okay, I just need to do this.
Exactly. And you've already got enough information behind you that when someone gives you specific advice, it will make sense to you.
Like it clicks. The light bulb turns on.
Absolutely. And that can get in the way. And the other one is also remembering, I think this is really important, and it's really important in general, that idea of contacting your staff, contacting your seminar tutors, your module leaders, engaging with those materials. That's really important. But it's also remembering that you're not defined. Rachel's not here today, but if Rachel was here, I know what she'd say, and she's absolutely right, is that always remember you're not defined by the grade. You're not, whatever happens, if this essay turns out to not be perfect, and it won't be perfect, that's fine, because what you'll get as a result of this essay is you'll get some feedback, and you'll be able to work on that feedback, and you'll be able to engage with that. And that in itself is valuable. This process of writing itself is valuable. And if you're spending your time and your energy on it, That's great. And I think for people who are perfectionists, if you follow this pathway, and if you go down the idea of you spending a lot of time on your own and then you're getting advice from others, you also do have to remember at some point it's just got to be good enough. It doesn't have to meet absolutely everything ever. It doesn't need to be the most perfect thing in the world. It just needs to be good enough. And I think that's a really important one just to keep there and to keep level, is that there's no competition here. There's no competition. There's only learning, and you are always going to learn from that process, and you are always going to get something from the process. And you don't need to be as anxious as maybe you are. And again, if you are anxious, that's exactly the moment where you reach out to us, because we love to hear from people. If they're feeling like things are heavy, then that's a really important moment.
Exactly.
So, Daanish, we have come to the end of the podcast, and of course, we have missed Rachel today. Rachel couldn't be with us today. She is poorly, but we have ever so missed her. But this has been a glorious conversation. So we've spoken about assessments. We've spoken about keeping calm during assessments, that idea of the importance of passion. We have spoken about the importance of how to become inspired and not just waiting for inspiration, but actively seeking that out. We've spoken about having a long-term focus, and that's for people that maybe are more inclined to leave things to the last minute. And we've also spoken about people that are inclined towards perfectionism, and how that sometimes good enough is good enough, and how they might be able to get themselves out of the loop. So I think we've spoken about some super things.
We have indeed. I've enjoyed this. I've missed this, and it's been beautiful. It's been a beautiful time.
Well, listen,
right.
We will speak in a couple of weeks' time.
Goodbye. Have a great couple of weeks. That'd be great.